For Honor offers players the chance to pit Vikings, knights, and samurai against one another in a ridiculous historical matchup that was never intended to be historically accurate. In fact, when one of you suggested I do this video, I told a colleague of mine who's a historical consultant at Ubisoft Montreal, and he laughed and said that this is not a historical game. But that doesn't mean that it still can't be useful for talking about historical problems. And in this video, I'm going to use For Honor's mashup of Vikings, samurai, and knights to explore some of the challenges and benefits of comparative history. I'm Dr. Darren Reid, and this is History Through Games. Thank you for tuning in. I'm a historian at McGill University, which also happens to be the city where For Honor was created. And this is a video series where I use video games to explore historical themes and concepts. And as I always say in my videos, I want this to be a collaboration with you. So please let me know in the comments if you have any games you think I should play, if you have any comments on these videos, or if you have ideas of historical themes to explore in the future, because I want to cater this channel around your interests. So the basic premise of For Honor is that the combination of a natural catastrophe with the political machinations of a central villain character result in Vikings, knights, and samurai all fighting against each other for domination. And such a matchup never took place historically. These are from largely different regions of the world, largely from different time periods, although there's a little bit of overlap. And it's impossible to know for sure the answer to questions like which of the three are stronger, or which of the three would have won in a fight. And many historians would argue that it's dangerous even to try comparing military power from different time periods and different regions of the world, because it risks essentializing things that are very contextually specific. There's many examples of harmful historical comparisons, like Arnold Toynbee's book, A Study of History, which compared different world civilizations against each other to create a universal ladder of civilizational progress. Many historians therefore argue that comparison requires historians to select things, to create abstract categories, to detach phenomena from their specific context, and that historians should never do that. I, however, and a good number of other historians, counter-argue that we can still do useful comparisons while attending to local context in order to identify maybe larger trends in world history, or help us identify what makes each unit of comparison unique and situated in its own special context. So to give you an example of how we could do that, I'm going to look through For Honor's comparison of knights, Vikings, and samurai to see what makes each group unique in their own historical context. Let's just start with Vikings and samurai. At face value, they're actually fairly similar. They use similar military weapons, armor, and techniques, although their style and their fashion were very different. Vikings had much better naval technology, but samurai famously defeated the huge Mongol navy in 1281, so that's actually a fairly decent matchup. Vikings and samurai were also much more than simply warriors. Vikings were traders, explorers, colonizers, administrators, and much more. Samurai, too, were often, yes, on one hand they were warriors, but they were also elite administrators, and magistrates, and diplomats. So while samurai is a much more specific term for a select group of highly elite warriors / politicians / bodyguards and so on, and Viking is a much more general term for a group of people, they're actually fairly comparable at face value. They even overlapped in time periods. The Viking Age is much more earlier, from roughly 700 to 1100 CE, and the Samurai Age is more like 1000 to 1870 CE, there is overlap around the 11th and the 12th centuries. So even though they're on vastly different sides of the world, they did exist at the same time briefly. But deeper comparative analysis starts to reveal some bigger significant differences between the two military traditions that help us understand why each was particularly suited to its own historical context. One major difference was military organization. Vikings often operated in small military groups. The largest army we know of a Viking army was called the Great Heathen Army, and it invaded England in 865 CE. That Great Heathen Army was only between 1,000 to a couple thousand warriors. Vikings were more interested in land that could be taken and occupied with limited formal large-scale warfare. And their military organization was built around that idea. Samurai organization was extremely different. Samurai fought as small parts of large alliances between ruling parties, and those alliances could produce massive armies. At the 1576 siege of Minamata Castle, a samurai army totaled over 115,000 soldiers. So when we compare these two organization systems, we can understand why each military tradition was better suited to its context. Vikings were mobile and highly suited to raids and small-scale warfare, which explains why they were so successful at colonizing land around the world. Samurai, although not as mobile, were very well suited to fighting in large formal campaigns, which explains why they were so successful in fighting in formal military wars on the Japanese islands and in Japanese invasions of Korea and China. So even though For Honor is not intended to be historically accurate, and even though its inclusion of having knights fighting Vikings, fighting samurai, is historically ridiculous, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have value for thinking about historical problems. These hypothetical historical comparisons can provide insights into what makes different historical phenomena unique, those insights which might not be obvious if you're studying phenomena in isolation. But I'd like to hear what your thoughts on this subject are. Do you think there's value in comparing things that are so different, like Vikings and samurai, in order to identify significant similarities or differences, or to identify larger trends? Or do you take the opinion of many other historians that these historical phenomena are so contextually specific that they're inherently incomparable, and that trying to make comparisons can lead to essentializations and generalizations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as I always say, let me know if you have any ideas for future videos, and I'd be happy to craft my future content around your interests. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can check out some of my other videos in this series, History Through Games, or check out my sister series, Video Game Lit Review, where I discuss not necessarily the historical content of video games, but I compare what historians or what other scholars have to say about a wide variety of video games out there. So that's all for today. I will see you in the next video. Farewell.